Chapter 36. The interior of Liam's plane looked like a fancy, modern living room. It had soft leather seats, a high-tech entertainment system, and calming lights. There was a long, gray leather sofa between two glass coffee tables with shiny table lamps. Across from the sofa were two big, gray leather recliners. Beyond that, there was a desk and a row of seats, leading to a small but stylish bedroom and bathroom. Normally, when Liam boarded for a flight of several hours, he went either to his desk or to the bedroom, depending on the time of day. Tonight, he went straight to the curved bar near the front of the cabin and poured himself a glass of strong whiskey. From the sofa, he watched the twinkling lights of the island vanish. Then he stretched his legs out in front of him and lifted the glass of whiskey to his lips, eager for the fiery liquid to start dulling the ache in his chest. He had turned off the cabin's lights and switched on a table lamp. Slowly, he began reviewing the last few days, searching for some clue that should have alerted him to the fact that he was overestimating the depth of Rain's feelings for him. An hour later, all he'd come up with were haunting memories of an irresistible redhead with a heartwarming smile who'd kissed him and set him on fire, memories that all led him to the same unanswerable question. How could she have left with her boyfriend without at least meeting him at the shore to tell him goodbye? How could she have done that when she'd been so frank and brave about her feelings for him? Swallowing over the unfamiliar constriction in his throat, he drew a long breath and leaned his head back, willing himself into a state of pleasant numbness where he could think about her without this gnawing sense of bewildered loss. Instead, he remembered the quiet joy of sitting up in bed, drowsy and contented, watching the sunrise together, and the unexplainable pleasure of seeing her hand resting next to his on the table in the casino restaurant. Her hand had looked so small and delicate beside his, and when he clasped his larger one over hers, he could still remember the warmth that had spread through him and the pleasure of holding her hand. He had been willing to go against his principles and give a genuine relationship a try. He was so ready to give true love a second chance, but she'd made her decision to stay with her boyfriend, and thanks to his stupid description of their so-called roles, that morning, he was stuck with that decision and bound by the very role he'd described and intended for her boyfriend to play. Once he realizes you want to be with someone else, he should accept it gracefully, wish you well, and then get the hell out of your life. So, what would you do if I changed my mind about breaking up with my boyfriend? She'd asked. In that case, the rules are very clear and simple. You would need to call me to say you have changed your mind, and then I would switch roles with him. On his way to the airport tonight, he'd phoned the hotel they'd checked into together to see if she'd left a message for him there, but she hadn't. She'd left without the courtesy of an explanation. Briefly, Liam considered the possibility that her disappearance was an immature attempt to prove she could make him jealous enough to come after her. If so, she wasn't the woman he thought she was. He knew how to find her. She wasn't lost to him. If he wanted to get her personal number right now, he could call Mia and ask for it. He could get to her and hear what she had to say. Several times he considered the possibility that something dire had happened that made her leave without a word. Each time, he eliminated that thought, along with the temptation to use it as an excuse to find her. She had had the time and the presence of mind to pick up a stray dog at the vet. She had intentionally left him to wait at the shoreline of Pineville because she didn't give a damn about him in the first place. Perhaps this was some sort of revenge she was having on him for the fact that he had once called her ugly. She had purposely made him believe they had something going on between them and then left him hanging. His phone on the table beside him began ringing, and he ignored it. If everything she said and did with him was pretense, then she must be laughing her ass off for making him fall so hard for her that he would actually feel hurt by her actions. His phone began ringing again, and Liam ignored it, but very few people had his personal number, and all of them were important to him for one reason or another. Since the whiskey he had been drinking had only made him sink deeper into a state of confused longing for Rain, he finally reached for the phone to give himself a distraction. "Whoever you are," he said aloud when he answered, "you're persistent as hell." "It's James," his friend said after a startled pause. "What's up with that arrogance? Did you get reminded by another one of your women of how heartless you are for playing with their feelings and emotions?" James joked, knowing Liam only got irrational when he had woman or company problems. "I don't want to talk about women or anything that has to do with the opposite gender," he gritted through clenched jaw. "And I hope you haven't just decided to call me after several months we haven't spoken to talk about that?" James immediately knew something was off with Liam, but he decided to cut straight to the chase of why he'd called instead of teasing him about a topic he obviously didn't want to talk about. "Neil called me an hour ago to say the authorities were swarming all over your apartment in New York. He said to ask you what the hell you've gotten yourself into and why the hell are the authorities bothering his family in the middle of the night for questioning?" Liam straightened slowly to an upright position. "Why would the authorities be questioning Neil and searching my apartment?" he asked, as anger began to replace some of the desolation he was feeling. "Perhaps it has something to do with Alvin's death?" Liam shook his head in denial. "My nephew called and told me the land caretaker had confessed to the murder." "Well, perhaps that's what the authorities want you to believe so they could lure you back to Zen in no time." "I'd suggest you get your lawyers prepared," James said. After Liam hung up the call with James and phoned his lawyers to meet him in Zen, he glanced at his watch and realized it was still set for Maranta time. With his thumb and forefinger, he pulled out the stem to set the time back 3 hours, and reality struck him with painful force. Less than 16 hours ago, he'd been lying in bed watching the sunrise over the mountain hills with Rain snuggled up beside him, telling him a funny story about her childhood and asking him random questions. Before he'd finally fallen asleep, he'd silently decided he would take her out on a real date and go for a starlight cruise. Instead of that, she was in Zen with a man she preferred over Liam, and he was trying to avoid getting involved in the murder of a step-brother he had despised with every fiber of his being. Forcing Rain out of his mind, Liam got up and headed to the bedroom to shower and change clothes before he landed and dealt with his family problem at the FBI office to get this over with. He could never get arrested because they could never hold him for a crime he didn't commit like they did Neil before. He had many connections in time to clear his name from this mess. Whatever the authorities were up to, they would end up losing their own jobs. He had many powerful men backing him up, Neil, James, and a lot more in the business world. Before the authorities would dare do anything, they'd think twice. From now on, he needed to concentrate solely on dealing with the authorities and helping Ashley and her 2 children through the ordeal to come. Giving Alvin a proper burial would be required of Liam. After that, he would attend the upcoming banquet for the mall he'd invested so much to build and then carry on with his plans to relocate. Rain Wallace was gone. It was over before it even began. Finished. She and their brief affair had to be put away now and forever. Mentally, Liam forced her out of his consciousness and shoved her into a dark cubbyhole from which she couldn't escape or come back to haunt him. Compartmentalizing was one of his greatest talents. It was a survival technique he'd developed as a boy when his father would beat him up for playing with girls' toys instead of toy guns, and it had served him extremely well then. In the bedroom, he pulled off his shirt. Then he went into the bathroom, opened a cabinet, and took out his bathing supplies. He started to turn on the shower but stopped when he looked towards the vanity mirror. His traitorous mind conjured up an image of Rain from this morning. She was looking at him in the mirror, hiding a smile, trying not to look as if she was taking pleasure from the casual intimacy of watching her lover shave. Beneath the lather on his face, he'd been hiding a smile of his own because he was experiencing a similar pleasure from having her watch him. Liam's hands clenched over the soap bar he was holding. His grip was so tight that the soap split into 2 and fell to the floor. "I will never forgive you for this, Rain," he muttered brokenly. Chapter 37. Her eyes flew open, and she stared blankly at the familiar ceilings of her room. Unable to sleep even after hours of trying to force herself into a deep slumber that would numb her mind of the hurt in her heart, she sat up on the bed and kicked off the blanket. Right beside her bed, Eric was settled on the makeshift temporary bed she had made for him before Mia and her family would return from their trip and take the dog with them. Rain bent down to rub his head and then straightened up. Walking out of her room with the dog following right on her heels, she went straight to the kitchen and absent-mindedly poured herself water. With her fingers slightly trembling, she slid onto the dining chair and looked down at the glass of water where her fingers were wrapped around it, and a beautiful diamond ring rested on her ring finger with a blank expression. She had not allowed herself to think of Liam or his betrayal even for a second since the time Max had brought her home and ordered dinner for her. She had numbed her feelings and did everything automatically without thinking. She had walked Max to the elevator of her complex apartment building as usual and even allowed him to kiss her goodnight without feeling any emotions. She was too wounded and numb to do anything, not until now, where she couldn't fall asleep and was tossing and turning, did she allow herself to look back on her time with Liam Thompson and hate herself for every single second of it. And as she sat there at the dining table, staring blankly at the glass of water with Eric rubbing his head on her lap as if he could feel her emotions. A memory flashed back to her mind. She saw her 17-year-old self, a girl with dark, thinning red hair, large glasses almost the size of her face, and many unsightly pimples, drooling over the photo on the screen of her phone on the balcony of her room. It was a photo of her crush, a man she had liked at first sight, Liam Thompson. He had recently modeled for a fashion house in new military attire that fit him perfectly, and his pictures were all over the billboards of the city, with many young girls going crazy for his looks. She marveled at how handsome and unreal he looked in the picture. Though she'd never seen him in person, she'd fallen in love with him so badly her heart would go crazy at the sight of just his pictures. Sitting on the balcony of her room, she looked dreamily at his smiling, handsome face on her screen, then glanced up at the starry night sky filled with countless shimmering stars. Among the many stars, one appeared the brightest, and she stared at it, closing her eyes and clasping her hands tightly. To the moon in the sky, "The stars are my witness, my wishes be granted, or these tears I'll cry," she said before beginning her wish on the North Star. She'd read somewhere that as long as you believe, the North Star will grant you your wish. "Little North Star, please hear me out for once and grant me just this one wish. I will never ask for anything else apart from this, just this once. Make Liam Thompson notice me. Let him reply to my letters. I'd give anything for him to like me," she pleaded desperately, her hands tightly clasped together. "I know the pimples on my face are unsightly, but let Liam Thompson like me regardless." She opened her eyes after making her wish and glanced down at her phone, still wanting to continue staring at Liam's photo, but the screen had gone blank. The light on the balcony made her see her reflection on her blank phone screen. Slowly and painfully, the broad smile on her face began to fall. Her huge glasses and braces, combined with her pimples, made her look. She didn't want to say the word, but deep down, she knew she wasn't beautiful. No boy had ever approached her or seemed interested in her because of her looks, and if she could just stop herself from picking at her pimples, they might stop appearing every morning. And with looks like hers, only a blind man would want to date her. But then love is blind, she thought with a smile. If Liam was made for her, he wouldn't see her flaws, he would like her wholeheartedly. Filled with teenage excitement, she went back to her room and sealed her next love confession letter along with her picture to Liam, who she had heard hadn't returned to camp yet. As usual, Rain sprayed her perfume and used her lipstick lips to kiss the pink envelope, leaving a lip mark on it as a token of her love and devotion to him. The next day, she posted it to the Thompsons' postbox in Mirage Mesa, knowing he hadn't left yet. However, she had never expected to get his reply within 24 hours. She was sitting in her room, reading an online romance novel that had made her more delusional about love and romance and her feelings for Liam, when their housekeeper came in with a boring brown envelope that had her name on it. Rain was so excited when she saw it was a reply from Liam. The stars had granted her long-dying wish of hearing from him. In her haste to open the envelope, she accidentally broke her nail but didn't even care. She hugged the housekeeper, who looked taken aback by the sudden excitement in the little miss, who was jumping up and down saying, "The stars have granted my wish." Then she sat down on her bed, grinning as she began to read his letter. However, the letter was not long. It was just 2 lines, and those 2 lines shattered her heart. Her grin slowly disappeared, and her green eyes welled up with tears. The letter read, "Stop sending me stupid letters with strong perfume. You're not my type. I don't roll with little girls with terrible ugly skin." As she read the lines, disbelief and hurt washed over her. The excitement drained from her face, replaced by a profound sadness. She felt her chest tighten, and the tears she had held back began to flow freely. Hugging herself, she realized how foolish she had been to believe that a star could change her fate, or that a handsome man like Liam Thompson would like her. And she'd been stupid yet again a few years later and fell into another delusion that Liam was her soulmate and that they were meant for each other. All the while he was deceiving her and making his own plans to shatter her. Liam Thompson had purposely traveled all the way to the island because Max had mentioned her being there, just so he could get his sweet revenge on her for something that was between him and her brother. He had gone to that restaurant knowing she was there and purposely walked into her path until she bumped into him with the Michelada. He had then manipulated her into taking him for dinner and seduced her into believing they had something special between them. And because she was so eager to be loved and desperate to go to bed with him, she had foolishly believed everything he said. He had been living in Zen with his stepbrother's wife, and he never even mentioned that he was in the same city as she because he had no intentions of taking their relationship to any level. Unable to keep analyzing Liam's antics in luring her into his traps, she hugged herself and automatically stood up from the chair and walked into the living room, where she threw herself onto the sofa. Before she had left for the island with Max, she had left her blanket on the sofa, as she'd slept there crying about her father. The blanket was still there now. She pulled it over her body, but she was still shivering inside from the aftermath of everything that had happened. She felt like crying until she could no longer feel the ache in her chest, but she didn't want to shed tears for Liam. He had hurt her in the worst way possible, and she didn't want to give him the courtesy of shattering her completely. She decided to call Mia and tell her she was back, engaged to Max, and maybe ease into the story about her short affair with Liam after that. Talking to someone about it might help her feel more at ease and in control before she would have to go back to her everyday life on Monday and run the restaurant as planned. Then, perhaps, even try to put Liam away like he had never been a part of her life. Curling up on the sofa, she picked up her phone and called Mia. Though it was late here, it should be morning in New York. Her friend picked up the call on the first ring as if she was expecting a call from her. "I was just about to call you, Rain," Mia's voice came from the other side of the phone. "Are you all right?" she asked worriedly. "Why?" "Nothing. My mind just keeps wandering to you, and then I thought to give you a call, but I hesitated because of the time difference." "It's midnight there. Why are you still awake?" At the sound of Mia's scolding voice, Rain could no longer hold back her built-up emotions and burst into tears. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably with her sobs. She bit down on her lips to hold back her sobs, but it was impossible. "Rain, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Did Max do something to hurt you?" Mia asked, sounding anxious and worried at the broken sound of her friend's sobs. "I'm engaged," she cried out, choking on her sobs and alerting the dog, who came to lay down beside the sofa and placed his head on the sofa next to her face. "What? When and how? I fell in love with a guy and got engaged." "To Max, or the guy?" "I got engaged to Max." "Then everything is perfect, right?" "Right. Then why are you crying?" Mia asked. "Because I also took your advice and went to bed with someone." Mia fell silent for a complete 4 seconds as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. "How did that go?" Rain leaned her head back on the sofa and closed her eyes, trying to force her lips into a smile. "Not very well," she whispered. "Who is the guy? Tell me the details and how it happened." For a complete hour, Rain told Mia everything in detail from how she'd bumped into Liam to how he'd used her and everything else she'd discovered about him. "I'm going to call that Liam right now and hear what the hell he was thinking." "How dare he?" "Don't call him," Rain said quickly. "I don't want to have anything to do with him again. I will never forgive him for the hurt he caused me," she whispered brokenly and told Mia about Max expecting her to handle seeing Liam at the banquet in 2 days. "I don't know how I'm going to face him after what he did to me." Mia wasn't pleased at all with Max's suggestion to make her friend do such a thing. Though Rain was her best friend, Liam was also her friend as well as her husband's best friend. She didn't want any of them getting hurt, nor did she like the fact that Liam had gone out of his way to break Rain because of Jason and Max. "I don't think it's wise to follow Max's advice on making him believe he had been used instead, and I wouldn't advise you to hide away from him forever either," Mia said after a moment of silence. If Rain hadn't stopped her, she would have called Liam right then and there to hear what he had to say, but it wasn't her place to interfere unnecessarily and make things worse for her friend. However, if what Rain said was true, that Liam had used her, she would be forced to hate him for being heartless. Then what should I do? Just show up being yourself and don't let him see how much he broke you. You're engaged now, that's all that matters. Are you going to be there? Rain asked. Of course. Neil's company also invested in the mall, so we will surely be there. Lauren will be there as well. You guys get along pretty well without me. Don't worry, we'll be there for you. Chapter 38. Liam's white Lamborghini Aventador purred to a halt in front of the imposing entrance of the Zenplex, the new state-of-the-art facility where authorities conducted high-profile interrogations for important figures. The sleek lines of the car mirrored Liam's own meticulous appearance. As he stepped out, his face was a mask of emotionless precision. It was a rare sight to see Liam Thompson devoid of his usual charm and expressiveness, but today, he was a study in cold detachment. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that hugged his athletic frame, the cut emphasized his broad shoulders and narrow waist, the rich fabric catching the light with a subtle sheen. His presence was magnetic, drawing every eye as he strode into the building with long, confident strides. The polished leather of his shoes echoed against the marble floors, and the subtle scent of his cologne lingered in the air. Everyone in the bustling corridor froze, their conversations halting mid-sentence as they turned to watch the most handsome bachelor of all time walk in like he owned the place. Gasps of admiration and whispers of awe rippled through the crowd. Liam's chiseled features, piercing black eyes, and impeccably styled hair made him appear as if he had stepped out of a glossy magazine. His aura commanded attention, an unspoken authority that rendered the most composed individuals speechless. With his 3 lawyers trailing closely behind him, each wearing an expression of determined professionalism, Liam walked with a deliberate, almost leisurely pace into the interrogation room. The detectives already inside stiffened as he entered, but he paid them no heed. He moved with the grace of a predator, each step measured, exuding a controlled power, as he hadn't come here to play. He was here on a serious case that would either cause them a lawsuit or put him behind bars. He ignored all of them entirely as he approached the table, pulling a chair away with a smooth, practiced motion. He sat down, crossing his ankle over his left knee, his posture relaxed. Only then did he lift his gaze to meet the eyes of the detective. "I'm here," he said, his voice a deep, calm timbre that filled the room. Outside the interrogation room, the scene was one of barely contained chaos. Almost every female detective in the building had converged on the two-way mirror, vying for a glimpse of the man who had so effortlessly commanded their attention. Among the people standing outside the mirror was Will Parker. He wasn't in charge of the interrogation, so he stood outside to observe the activities inside. Nonetheless, his female colleagues in the office were starting to annoy him with how they were acting like they'd never seen a handsome man like Liam Thompson. Will Parker's assistant peered through the two-way glass and remarked, "Interesting, the way he's sitting in there like he is the king of the world." Liam was sitting on the side facing the two-way mirror, but he'd angled his chair away from the table and was sitting with one foot propped on the opposite knee, his back to Will. A tablet and pen were on the table near his elbow, along with an untouched cup of coffee provided by the agents. "He has turned his back on one lawyer, and he's ignoring the others," the assistant commented as he took in the scene inside the room. "He doesn't think he needs them," Will speculated. "I think he intends to handle this entirely by himself without the help of his lawyers." "His lawyers undoubtedly warned him not to donate any of his DNA by drinking anything we give him," the assistant said. "He also knows this is a two-way mirror and that we're probably standing out here." As if on cue, Liam turned his head to the right and looked straight toward them with a blank, bored look. "Fuck me," remarked a female agent by the mirror. "He's even better looking in person. I'd give up anything to have a casual fling with a hunk like that." Will ignored that and tipped his head toward the glass. "Here we go," he said. "Edward is going to start off with the photographs sent to us by that informant to give him the idea that we know all of his movements for months now." Edward, the agent in charge of the interrogation, thumbed through the photographs they had been gathering from the unknown man who made them believe Liam was involved with the disappearance of his stepbrother and selected a close-up picture of Liam and Rain kissing on the balcony at a hotel. "Let's work backward toward the day of your brother's murder, shall we?" Liam quirked a brow at him and said nothing. "Can you explain this for me?" Edward sighed and casually tossed the photograph on the table towards Liam. Liam leaned slightly forward, looked at it, and then at Edward. "Aren't you a little old to need an explanation for this?" Edward slapped another, similar photograph on the table, but this one was taken the night before at the villa, and Liam's hand was on Rain's breast. "Explain this as well." Liam barely flicked a glance at the photograph, his blood boiling at the sight of the woman in it. "What part of it don't you understand?" "That's interesting," Will said. "I didn't think it would be this easy to get a reaction out of him." "I don't see any reaction. He looks completely unperturbed," the female agent at the mirror argued. "No," he clenched his jaw, but just for an instant. "He's angry, and he's also very skilled at hiding it. Remember that in court," the assistant noted. Edward took his time putting the photos back into the right folder, letting Liam see that they had many photos of his activities on the island in the stack of files. "Maybe we should start from the beginning, instead," Edward announced. "Where were you on the day Alvin Thompson disappeared?" "I don't know what day that was," Liam replied calmly. "He was gone for several days before his wife and son realized he wasn't at the second mansion and reported him missing." "Have you been to the Milo property in the past months since your brother went missing?" "I haven't been there in decades." "You're sure about that?" "Positive." Another detective took over. Reaching into an envelope, he removed a clear plastic evidence bag containing a leather button with a pattern and insignia on the front. "Do you recognize this?" he asked Liam. His three lawyers tensed. "You don't have to answer that, Mr. Thompson," one of them said quickly. Liam ignored the warning. "It looks like the missing button from one of my overcoats. Do you know where we found this button, Mr. Thompson?" When Liam didn't reply, the detective continued, "We found it stuck under the soil where your brother's body was found. That place is located a few feet from the property line of the Thompson land, which belongs to you. You said you've not been there in decades. Do you want to rethink that answer?" "No, it was right the first time. Can you explain, then, how this button from your coat turned up in that place?" "I can't explain it." The detective perched a hip on the corner of the table. "How do you suppose a button that you admit came from a coat of yours got snagged under the soil of the land you've not been to in decades?" "I repeat," Liam said patiently, "I can't explain it." The female agent at the mirror was too smitten by Liam's charisma and demeanor that she felt like melting. She shot a pleased look at Will and was surprised to see that he wasn't impressed but was frowning, his hands shoved into his pockets. "He's not the murderer," Will said in answer to her puzzled stare. "And he's sure he can prove it." "What do you mean? How?" "I don't know, but I have a hunch he's getting ready to tell us. He has glanced at his watch twice, which means he's getting fed up and has someplace to be at." In the interrogation room, the detective regarded Liam steadily. When he said nothing more, the detective put pressure on him. "Let me tell you how we think your coat button got stuck under that soil. I'm sure it would be a very entertaining, imaginative story, but I'm a little short on time. Do you have anything else you want to discuss other than this button?" Liam had already decided to skip the upcoming mall luncheon banquet and leave the country as soon as he was done here, and the detectives were wasting his time. When the detective frowned at him and said nothing, Liam continued, "I'll take that to mean you don't. In that case, here's what you need to know. Alvin disappeared in October. The coat that button came off of was made for me in Paris and delivered to me in Zen on Christmas Day in winter." Edward stepped forward and said in a good cop tone, "Where was the coat purchased, and can anyone there verify the date it was delivered to you?" "I'll give you my Paris tailor's name. She can also tell you where the buttons came from and verify that I have no other clothing with identical buttons." "Where is the coat now?" "I sent it back to her so that she could order a new button and mend the hole left by the last one." "Is there anything else, or are we finished? I have a plane to catch." "Not quite," Edward sighed. "When did you first discover that the button was missing from your coat?" "In mid-January when I decided to wear it for the first time. I took the coat out of the closet and realized that the button was gone. I don't know where I lost it." Will Parker stared through the window. Either he doesn't know, or he doesn't want to believe it. Without shifting his gaze, he said, "Tell Edward to come out here." The assistant knocked on the door and poked his head into the interrogation room. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Detective Edward, could I have a word with you?" Edward strolled out, closed the door, and looked at Will. "Are you buying Thompson's story?" Will nodded. "For now, yes. Get his passport, and tell him not to leave the country until we've checked with his tailor and had a look at that coat ourselves." Liam took one look at Edward's face when he walked back into the interrogation room and knew what the man would say next. He stood up, wordlessly pulled his passport out of his inside jacket pocket, and tossed it onto the table. Then he picked up the coffee, took a swallow, and put the cup down. "There's your DNA, voluntarily given. Try not to mix it up with anyone else's while you're finishing your investigation. Anything else?" he clipped, while his attorneys rose to their feet and picked up their briefcases. "Yes, don't leave the country until you hear from us." "I'll heed that warning," Liam replied curtly. "And now you'd better heed mine. If I ever see any of those photographs anywhere, I will bury Will Parker, and you, under a mountain of lawsuits filed against both of you personally, along with the city of Zen and whoever your informant is. And while I'm at it, I'll make sure the media learns about your voyeuristic hobby of encouraging citizens to take private pictures of people. In short, I will smear your names all over the press." "Are you threatening me?" Edward asked stiffly. "Didn't I just make that clear?" Liam snapped, glaring at all the agents in the room, and started walking towards the door, followed by his smirking attorneys. Then he turned back and aimed his next threat toward the two-way mirror at Will Parker. "I'll give you the rest of the afternoon to get in touch with my sisters and Ashley Thompson and explain to them that I had nothing to do with Alvin's death. If you fail to convince them, I'll bring them to your office in the morning, and you can do it in front of me." After Liam left, Parker opened the door and walked into the interrogation room. "That's why I didn't want to cross that guy," he remarked idly, gazing at the open door. Transferring his gaze to Edward, he said, "Meet me in my office tomorrow at 11 and bring all the files with you. I know who murdered Alvin Thompson. And while we are still at this, look into that informant who kept sending us information." Chapter 39. Unlike other events, the grand opening banquet for the new Skyline Shopping Center was an elite ceremony with an invitation list containing only 450 names, each chosen based on their class, investment in the mall, or relationship to the investors. Not everyone was invited to the ceremony. After the formal ribbon cutting at the entrance, attended by all the investors, an elaborate dinner was served, and a silent auction took place featuring expensive items, including fabulous artwork and museum-quality jewelry. The banquet took place inside the shopping center's event hall, which occupied the top 2 floors of the new Skyline Shopping Center, a spectacular 80-story skyscraper made of stone and glass located in downtown Zen. The building was a breathtaking sight for the guests, who started entering after the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The mall's interior was designed to impress, with no expense spared. The private elevator lobby on the building's 2nd floor featured a sleek, octagonal rotunda with a modern, stylish glass railing. This railing guided new arrivals to a sweeping staircase that gracefully descended to the 1st floor. A grand, contemporary chandelier, 1 story in height, was suspended from the center of the 2nd floor ceiling, its many-tiered gold frame dripping with dazzling crystals. At the front of the room, standing near their table, Neil watched his wife walking slowly through the crowd on the 1st floor. He excused himself from the people around him. "Looking for someone, my love?" he asked, walking up behind her as she scanned the crowd. She jumped at the sudden sound of his voice behind her and swirled around with a small pout on her lips. "You still enjoy creeping up on me from behind, don't you?" She shot him a small glare and resumed scanning the faces of the guests. Neil smiled and casually slipped his arm around her waist as he stood beside her, chuckling. "Who are you looking for, by the way? Your husband is over here and our children are in the kids section." "Who else is missing?" "Rain," she replied without taking her eyes away from the arriving guests. "I met her, Lauren, and Max at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, but I couldn't stay long to chat because I needed to take the kids to the children's section. Now everyone is arriving, but I don't see her anywhere." Neil, who knew about Rain and Liam, didn't comment because his friend had told him how he'd been played by a woman for the first time in his life. Though he considered Rain a friend, he didn't like what she did to Liam and would appreciate it if she didn't show up today, as Liam wouldn't take her appearance lightly. Not wanting to get caught up in Liam and Rain's affairs, he pulled his wife's arm and led her away from the arriving guests. "I want to introduce you to someone," he said when she glared up at him and tried to pull her hand away, but relaxed when she heard his words. "Rain will be fine. You said she's with Lauren, and from what I know, Dr. Lauren and Rain are adults. They will come in when they are ready." "Rain," Lauren said sympathetically, "we can't spend the night in the ladies' room. Drink this and let's go." As she spoke, Lauren removed Rain's empty champagne glass from her trembling hand and substituted it with her own glass of lemon juice. "Bottoms up," she coaxed. "Liam is down there," Rain said, her voice shaking with nerves. "I saw him outside when the investors were cutting the ribbon," she told Lauren, who had been her and Mia's friend since she began dating James, who introduced her to them 2 years ago. Ever since they'd become friends, the 3 of them hung out together whenever they had the chance, forming a strong bond. Just like Mia, Rain had told Lauren, who from the beginning didn't like Liam Thompson, about what happened between them. Lauren had agreed with Max that Rain should make Liam believe he had been used as her last fling before marriage to get back at him. "I know that. Now, let's make sure he sees you," Lauren said, patting her shoulders. She had never liked Liam since the day she first met him and James at the hospital years ago when Mia was sick, and she hated him even more now for what he did to her poor friend. "I'm not ready to go out there." Rain shook her head. "Yes, you are." Mindlessly, Rain sipped the glass of lemon juice, the second one in 10 minutes. "How do I look?" Lauren strolled around her for a final inspection. Rain's elegant trumpet gown was a sleek, maroon satin dress with a fitted bodice and a stylish off-the-shoulder neckline. The gown hugged her curves perfectly, giving her a confident and sophisticated look. To complement the gown's style, her hair had been styled into smooth waves and swept back on one side, held in place with a diamond comb given to her by Max. "You look wonderful," Lauren decreed. That diamond comb matches perfectly with your earrings, she added, admiring the diamond earrings dangling from Rain's ears partway to her shoulders. Rain was about to speak when suddenly two female voices from the adjoining bathroom made her stop. "I have never seen a man that good-looking in my entire life," remarked one of the females in excitement. I almost melted when his gaze swept past me in the hall. "Did you see the look of male admiration in his eyes? I think he likes me and wants to ask me out. Denise told me last night that he asked her out to dinner. Perhaps he's changed his mind and wants me instead." "Liam Thompson asked Denise out?" asked the other female. "I'd be careful if I were her. Didn't you hear about his reputation for breaking women's hearts? Who cares, as long as one could get to share a bed with him? It will feel wonderful to be in his arms for one night." Rain's fists automatically clenched at those words, and she had to fight with her inner demons to stop herself from breaking down yet again at the realization that she wasn't the only woman who had fantasized about being held in his arms and who he'd given attention to. The two giggling women who'd been using the adjoining bathroom soon walked through the mirrored area and were taken aback to see Rain and Lauren. The women quickly smiled and nodded as they strolled past. Then they opened the door to leave, and a blast of laughter and music filled the ladies' room. Lauren waited until the door closed again. Then she removed the empty lemon juice glass from Rain's fingers and took Rain's hands in hers. "Don't let their words get to you. I promised you that I'd coach you and tell you how to get through this," Lauren said, looking solemnly into Rain's wide, overbright green eyes. Turning Rain toward the mirror, she said, "Look at yourself. You are absolutely stunning. This is your night, Rain. It's your debut as Max's future wife, and tonight you're going to find that even the biggest snobs here will welcome you as one of their own. They already know you're not a trashy gold digger. You're the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the world. Despite falling from grace, that doesn't make you any less than any of them. You're the Wallace successor. You also have a natural elegance and poise that people notice, and you have a kind heart that makes you infinitely appealing. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?" Embarrassed by all the flattery, Rain smiled and said, "I understand that. Tonight you want me to think I'm wonderful. You are wonderful. Now, this brings us to Liam Thompson. Sometime in the next couple of hours, you're going to come face to face with him." 3 women, laughing and talking, walked into the ladies' room to check their makeup, and Lauren and Rain both turned to the mirror, pretending they were doing the same thing. Rain reached into her purse for her lipstick, but her entire body was in flight mode at the thought of looking into Liam's dark eyes and seeing that charming, handsome face again. He'd made her laugh, he'd made her moan with pleasure, and then he'd held her in his arms as if he never wanted to let her go. Worse, much worse, he'd made her care so much that she thought she was in love with him. And then he'd sent her back to break up with Max, never intending to be there when she would return. Viewed with the clarity of a clear mind, she realized now that everything Liam did from the moment she met him on the island, even sending for an ambulance and doctor to help Eric, was done to ensure the accomplishment of his ultimate goal. There was no doubt in her mind now that he had sent her that Michelada himself and then sauntered into the restaurant to bump into her. In fact, just thinking about the way he'd made a date with her after she spilled the drink on him made her grind her teeth. "If I were you, I'd offer to take me to dinner instead." He must have been amazed and very pleased with himself when she agreed to take him for dinner like the fool she was. Her little teenage crush on him made it so much easier for him, and so much more fun, as he seduced Maximum Everett's witless girlfriend in his absence. "Stop replaying everything he did in your mind," Lauren urged the moment the other women left. "Just for tonight, you have to forget all the terrible details and stay objective, or you won't be able to pull this off. The reality is that Liam Thompson's ego is so fragile he needed to seduce you to get even with Max and Jason. If you had slept with him that night at the villa, it would have been over quickly, and you wouldn't have gotten emotionally involved. But you wanted to know more about him first, so he had to come back and tell you about his stepbrother. Are you saying it's my fault? Of course not. I'm trying to show you that hurting you wasn't his real goal. He wanted to drag your brother and Max down by having a fling with Max's girlfriend." Rain shivered at the coldness and ruthlessness of his actions. "I'll tell you something I haven't before," Lauren continued. "I think at some point, Liam enjoyed your company more than he expected. Otherwise, he would have patted you on the butt after having sex and sent you back to your hotel. Why would he do that when I was such an eager, cooperative bed partner?" Rain asked bitterly. "Good point, but why take you to a casino and, most revealing of all, sit up in bed and watch the sunrise with you? Guys who only want sex don't do that. To Rain's shame, she clung to that consolation, not because she believed it, but because she needed something to lessen her humiliation. But, Lauren continued brightly, he's still a cold, calculating bastard with a huge ego, and you're entitled to get some revenge tonight. How? Rain asked, leaning back against the vanity table. Treat him like he was just a forgettable flirtation. He's not going to buy that. He knew how I felt. I left to break up with Max and promised to hurry back. Yes, but he can't be completely sure you did it. Furthermore, he can't be completely sure that you weren't just using him as a temporary fling while Max was away. As if he would believe that. Rain scoffed. Trust me, he would. Max instinctively knows how to play this game. That's why he wanted you to be here tonight. He'll make sure Liam sees you with him, laughing, talking, and holding your head up high. By doing that, Max will show Liam that he's so insignificant that nothing he does could possibly matter to either of you. Rain wasn't entirely convinced, but if it would help her save face and feel less humiliated in his presence, she was ready to do her best to play her part tonight. You get it now, right? Lauren asked. Right. So, here's the only emotion you're allowed to show when you see Liam tonight. The only emotion that will give you some revenge. Rain raised a questioning brow at Lauren's dramatic pause. What? Amusement. You're going to treat him with amusement, as if you know an amusing little secret that he doesn't. What kind of secret could I possibly have? Rain asked, frustrated. That's exactly the question he'll start asking himself. That's the question that will trouble him for a long time. Chapter 40. Neil and Mia sat at their assigned table with their children, who had found their way into the hall, holding their little sister's hands instead of staying in the kids' section to have fun. Mia hadn't had the chance to go look for Rain again after her children came to join them in the hall. Neil had wanted to take them back to the kids' section, but after seeing his daughter's adorable little face and hearing her tiny voice say, "I want to stay with Dada," he immediately changed his mind and let them stay. While the two boys were busy getting along with the adults around their table, Neil was playing with Melissa on Mia's lap. "Mr. Thompson is getting along quite well with his grandma," remarked a man who was sitting beside their table, looking at Liam with his grandma. They had recently reunited after it was known that he had nothing to do with his stepbrother's death. Neil looked towards Liam and exchanged smiling glances with him as he tried to maneuver his paternal grandma in their direction while she clung to his arm, chattering happily and making him stop every few steps so she could introduce him to someone else. He was over a foot taller than she, and in order to hear her, he had to tip his head way down. James, who was sitting with Neil and Mia at their table, walked over to the bar and ordered wine for Liam. By the time James returned with the drink, Liam was finally arriving with his grandma at their table. Holding the drink out to him, James said, "Here's your reward for the successful completion of a long and exhausting journey to our table." "I needed this, thanks," Liam replied. Lifting the glass to his lips, he glanced up. And he saw Rain. He froze, staring, his brows drawn together in disbelief that she was here, and that the woman with curly red hair who'd kissed him on the balcony in Maranta was the glamorous redhead in a sophisticated satin gown strolling casually through the roomful of wealthy socialites, many of whom were drawing her aside to kiss her on the cheek and chat with her. She had no reason to be here when she wasn't a part of their class. The invitation was limited to only a few people, and not even Mia could have invited her friend to such an event. "That's Rain Wallace," Liam's business partner provided, following his gaze, thinking he didn't know her. "Her father died recently, and I understand she's going to try to run his business." "Have we ever eaten at Wallace's when you were here?" "No, we'll have to do that next time you're here," he added dryly. "I never had much luck getting reservations with less than 2 weeks' notice when her father was alive. Maybe Rain will give us a break." Andrea, Liam's grandma, happily joined the conversation. "Did you know Rain just got engaged down in the islands?" she asked Mia and Neil. "Yes," Mia said, watching as Liam's gaze briefly strayed to Rain again. His face was so expressionless that she couldn't read his emotions or know what he was thinking after what he'd done to Rain. However, she could tell he didn't know about her engagement by the flicker of shock that crossed his face. Apart from that, he was good at hiding his emotions. Andrea nodded emphatically and included Liam in the conversation. "Isn't that a romantic way to get engaged?" "I wouldn't know," he said smoothly, curtly. "It was officially announced 2 days ago in the magazine," she added. Peering forward, she saw Rain leaving the people who'd stopped to talk to her, and Andrea called out cheerfully, "Rain, dear, come over here." Satisfied when Rain looked up and nodded, Andrea turned to Liam and added, "You've met her fiancé, Liam." "Have I?" He had no idea who the fiancé was. "Yes. She's engaged to Max Everett." Liam stared at the wine in his glass. "Really, to Max Everett?" he said with a cold, ironic smile. Of all the men in the world, her boyfriend was one of the businessmen he didn't care about. Max Everett was just like Jason, two losers seeking attention in the business world. Mia's gaze flew sympathetically to Rain's, but Rain gave an imperceptible nod of assurance that she could handle seeing Liam again. However, Rain's knees shook, and she wished she had more than a few drops of champagne left in her glass to give her courage. But she managed to look calm and composed as she obeyed Andrea Thompson's summons and prepared to face the man who had used her and left her. "Hello, my dear," Andrea said. "I hope you and Max will be very happy," she added, then pressed a kiss to Rain's cheek. It was the identical ritual Rain had been through 50 times that night, a greeting, followed by best wishes, followed by a salutatory kiss on the cheek. This was some sort of prescribed engagement ritual known to everyone in high social circles. Mentally, she braced herself for Liam to follow the same ritual as Andrea added with quaint formality, "May I present my grandson, Liam?" Somehow, Rain managed to execute her plan flawlessly. She looked at Liam's shuttered eyes as if she knew an amusing little secret. "We've already met," she replied, leaning slightly forward and turning her cheek in automatic expectation of his salutatory kiss. "And we've already kissed," Liam replied coolly, ignoring her cheek. James and Neil swiftly stepped in front of the startled grandma, each tucking a hand through her arms, and escorted her toward their table with Mia and the children following behind to give Rain and Liam a private moment to talk. Stunned but utterly determined to appear light-hearted and calm no matter what he said or did, Rain tipped her head to the side and gave him a playful smile. "Haven't you any good wishes for me, Mr. Thompson?" she teased. "Let me think of the right one." He paused for a moment. Then he lifted his glass in a mocking toast and said, "To your continued success in climbing up the social ladder, Rain." Liam's accusation that she was a social climber caused Rain's resolve to slip several notches. "Don't tempt me to throw another drink at you. That would be too middle class," he said scornfully, "and you're trying to move up into the higher class after your fall. In the upper class, we cheat, lie, and we fuck each other's brains out in private, but we do not indulge in public displays of temper." Liam saw the banked emerald fires leaping dangerously into flames in her eyes, and he deliberately threw verbal gasoline at her. "Take some of my advice and remember the rules the next time you pick up another wealthy man in a hotel." "Shut up," Rain gritted furiously, "so that you can cheat again on that pompous asshole you're marrying." Rain's temper and anxiety exploded simultaneously, and she silenced him with the only means available. She flung what was left of her champagne at his face. There wasn't enough liquid to reach her target, but a few drops hit his chest and stained his shirt front. With a mixture of fright, shame, and satisfaction, she braced for an explosive reaction from him. That lacked the impulsiveness it had in Miranda, he remarked nonchalantly as he began casually flicking droplets off his shirt, "but this color is an improvement." Rain opened her mouth to insult him but remembered they were in a hall filled with guests who might be listening to their conversation. She turned her head to the left, where an anxious waiter was already lowering a tray of champagne to them. Belatedly desperate to appear normal, Rain traded glasses with the waiter and picked up a napkin with shaky fingers. Then her attention swerved back to Liam as he continued in that same cool, conversational drawl, "Hand me your napkin and paste an apologetic smile on your face." Rain automatically handed him the napkin. He took it and completed his sentence, his gaze on the spots he was dabbing off his shirt. "Or else Everett may figure out he's marrying an immoral bitch with an ugly temper." "I'm warning you," Rain said frantically, but she had nothing to threaten him with, so she glanced around to see if they were being observed and tightened her grip on the stem of her champagne glass because it seemed like the only solid reality to cling to in a world gone mad. When she didn't complete her threat, Liam slanted a glance at her and noticed her fingers tightening on her champagne glass. Without taking his eyes off his shirt front, he said in a silky voice, "If you so much as tilt that glass in my direction again, you'll be sprawled on your ass before the first drops hit the floor." Mistaking her stillness for indecision, he lifted his head and looked at her with eyes as dark as a bottomless pit filled with death. "Try me, Rain," he invited softly. "Go ahead, try it again and see where you end up." Rain's stricken paralysis gave way to a trembling realization that repelled her so much it reduced her voice to a shaking whisper when she said it aloud. "How could you? Underneath all your fake charm and slick social polish, you're actually a monster." Instead of being insulted or angered, he looked at her in baffled amusement. Then he chuckled and shook his head. "What were you expecting to find there, sweetheart? A heartbroken, jilted lover?" Before Rain could react to that, he touched his glass to the edge of hers in a mockery of a toast and said in a bored voice, "Goodbye, Miss Wallace." He left, and Rain found herself staring into Neil Wayner's darkened gray eyes from the distance. Without a word, Neil turned on his heels and followed Liam while pulling his reluctant wife and children along with him.